the London system has taken the CCT by storm. We had tons of Londons yesterday in both the Division 3 and Division 2 final. Alireza has shown that he likes to go for a London system type setup with Bishop F4 and E3 when 1E4 is not working out for him. And there we go. Not exactly the London, but an extremely fashionable line that is championed by Nihal Sarin. Nihal plays this exact setup against me in Blitz all the time. It looks very innocuous, but let me tell you, it's not so easy to equalize with black. I like this choice.
Yeah, and not what I'm used to seeing, I've got to say, from Alireza Firouzja. I know he's been experimenting a bit with, like you said, London systems, some knight f3, b3 kind of setups. But yeah, this one, very much frustrating for any Grunfeld player. Maxime Vachier Lagrave, well known as maybe the world-leading expert on the Grunfeld throughout his career. And this one, a slower start to the game. The center just looks very stodgy, very blocked for now. How do you normally react? You mentioned you've got a lot of experience on the black side. What do you think is going through Vachier Lagrave's mind?
In my case, experience has not equated to good results, and I should be taking notes right now because I've never actually put the bishop on f5 at so early a stage. And Alireza is engaging that bishop. He plays bishop d3, offering the trade. I mean, you see this bishop tension very, very often in these types of structures. MVL does trade, and there's clearly defined pros and cons, David, to this trade. On the one hand, yes, white's pawns are doubled. White loses some mobility on the queen side. On the other hand, a lot of these squares are under white's control, and it can be kind of hard for black to generate further activity in the center.
Mm-hmm. Pawn breaks and Robert Hess. Where's Robert when we need him? He would talk about all the pawn breaks, c5, e5 right now, and White's choices may be somewhat limited, but White controlling some key central squares. What do you make of this last move, Vachier Lagrave? He's played very quickly. I mean, that is his trademark. Is he still in preparation, do you feel? This idea of c5 as you're highlighting on the board, or is this just him in freestyle mode? Black has no weaknesses, just trying to get some action going.
Yeah, it's very hard to say with MVL because sometimes, he's in preparation. Sometimes it's sort of a middle ground where it's not that he's had this exact position in a chess-based file, but broadly speaking, maybe he studied this structure and he knows that, okay, knight fd7 and c5 is a typical idea. We can see that Alireza is taking this idea very seriously. b4 is on the board, and early adjustments by Firouzja. He's playing faster, and he's gotten a more strategic type of battle where the price of a move is not as high as, let's say, a rook g1 Najdorf. Now the question for MVL, David, he can technically still play c5 and make it work tactically. Positionally, I think it's ill-advised. I think the question is, does he now prepare e5, or does he chisel away at white's king side with a move, queen side with a move like a5?
Yeah, a lot of options, Danya. Difficult question. That's why we see Maxime Vachier Lagrave spending some time now. Knowing him, he wants some action in the near future, at least. He won't want to maneuver around forever. I think this is a great opening choice, by the way, for everyone at home. Alireza Firouzja got punished in sharp lines 3 days ago when these two met. So now he's going for a quieter strategy. A good tip for everyone at home to switch things up. Try a different recipe if the one you've tried before isn't working. To answer your question, it looks like he's going to try and keep his options open a bit longer, Vachier Lagrave. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for e5 now that it's harder to break on the queen side. It feels like white has maximum control over c5, a5. It's going to be hard to do anything there. So maybe we'll see some development moves first. The black knight on b8 could hop out a6, c7 around, but eventually black will likely break. And yeah, I can see why Nihal Sarin is attracted to this, Danya. It feels like white's moves are just easier. You're going to castle, you're going to put rooks on c1. You're going to do stuff. But for black, it's very much, you feel a bit of burden, right? What to do next.
Yes. Now, it should be pointed out, this pawn on b4 is perfectly safe. It can be defended in response to queen b6. That was just a one-move threat. Instead, Maxime focusing on sort of maximizing the activity of his minor pieces, but he might be maximizing the passivity of his minor pieces. Where is that knight on c7 going? I think he's just sort of parking it there, long-term 24-hour parking. I'll deal with it later kind of thing. Here is the positional problem the black faces. Even if you play rook e8 and then e5, you don't solve, I think, the underlying problems in your position, and you could still be facing a potential minority attack when the time is right with a4 and b5. Maxime is actually provoking a4, clearly trying to get his knight around to d6, but he is investing, David, a lot of time in maneuvering his pieces to a square where it doesn't really have that many prospects because of this doubled pawn on d3, which would be fully restricting the knight's access to these juicy central posts.
Yeah, if you could just pick up that white pawn on d3, get it off the board, and trade it off for black's e7 pawn, we would have a Carlsbad structure, and that is the ideal square for a black knight, precisely because it can jump into those squares you're covering there with the blue arrows, c4 and e4. But this circuit for the black knight, I mean, since it's left b8, it's already moved 3 times. It's going to move a 4th time. Not clear where it's going after that. It definitely feels like Maxime's just making moves for the sake of moves right now. I think he's hoping a plan materializes a bit later, but yeah, this is really pleasant for white. Bishop a3, hinting that b5 will land if black ever touches the e7 pawn. The black knight on d6 not stable. Yeah, rook c1, rook b1. White's moves are just automatic. I'm loving Firouzja's position.
And let me tell you, b5 on the very next move is something to be reckoned with by Maxime. Now, Firouzja won't necessarily play it, but you can at least try to make it work. b5, c takes b5, and then you have this intermediate move, or you can swap the knight on d6. You have to be careful, though, because there black can play b takes a4. So, for example, I'm quickly going to show what could happen. I think rook e8 is a likely move here for Maxime getting out of the x-ray, and b5 is hasty, because after cb, bishop takes d6. If black recaptures on d6, it works like a charm. But black has b takes a4, and this is why you need to be so careful trying to initiate, let's say, tactical operations in a positional situation, because you could lose your entire advantage and then some. You could give up your bishop and then take on a4, but these are connected pass pawns. Last I checked, that's pretty dangerous. This is not what Firouzja wants, and lazy chess commentators like to say this would not be in the spirit of the position, and yet MVL just adds another layer of protection to the b5 square.
Yeah, but b5, the idea will linger, and Vachier Lagrave will have to calculate that type of thing you were just showing, Dania, for the next half dozen moves at least, every turn. First of all, Firouzja gets his rook onto the c1 square. I'm slightly surprised he didn't go with the other rook. Feels like the other rook had a nice square there. It's not clear where that piece is going now, but maybe he's going to double up and just sit and wait. And yeah, bit of a slower maneuvering game. This might be the calm before the storm. Either way, I'm very much loving the new strategy that Firouzja's kind of cooked up for this game. Maxime Vachier Lagrave, I've had a lot of games against him. We first started playing when we were like 8 years old, and the only time I've ever had success is in these types of slower positions where he gets a bit impatient and he lashes out. You need to try and stop him from calculating. That's the key.
That's right. Yeah, those concrete positions that they were getting, Maxime was really displaying his incredible intuition, right? We talk about how slowly Alireza was playing, how fast Maxime was prosecuting those chaotic positions and essentially finding either the best move or a move that maintained the evaluation. It's pretty breathtaking. How well developed his intuition is in mainline Najdorf's and Grunfeld. So opening choice, you got to give Alireza an A+. He puts the knight on c5, David, and now things are starting to get a little bit more concrete. Now, let me tell you what Maxime is not going to do. He is not going to take on c5, and he's not going to allow the b pawn to capture because white gets free pressure on this b7 pawn. But are you a little bit exposed? These pawns on a4 and b4, as imposing as they look, they could be targeted at the right moment by a well-timed undermining break such as a5.
Yeah, a5 is interesting. It feels counterintuitive to play that move now. He's already played a6 just a couple of turns ago, but this does highlight maybe why white's choice of rook. I mean, it's the hardest thing in chess, where to put which rook, I find, when you have a choice, a straight-up choice. But I would love to put one on b1, one on c1, because that's where the action is about to happen. It would very much deter your a5 break. But yeah, suddenly less clear what white would do there. Either way, okay, you're a5 on the board. I was going to say Maxime could just sit and do nothing and ask Firouzja what his plan is, but no, the action finally begins. Tension on the queen side, and this could go either way suddenly.
And remember that intermediate move I mentioned with a takes b4? I pointed out a similar intermediate move where the b pawn captured on a4. I think Maxime is using the same idea, because the detail that Alireza may have missed is that after knight takes d7, if you play queen takes d7, it's not just bad, it's essentially losing. David, I think you'll co-sign this point. And it's not because white is up a pawn, it's because this pawn on a5 causes a huge weakness on b7, and here white has the very obvious plan of attacking it by doubling on the b file. No, no, no. Maxime has spotted the tactical solution. A takes b4. Both minor pieces are hanging. This is a completely different story. Now, it's likely that Alireza still goes for a position like this, but I feel like the worst would be behind Maxime if this is the best that Alireza can do.
And Danya, just along these lines, before we go back to the game, maybe there's another intermezzo, another intermediate move, because I'm trying to justify why white can't take on a5 immediately to try and win a pawn in the game position. I'm wondering whether black can take with a rook.
Unbelievable.
Knight takes knight, and rook takes pawn on a4, and white has two pieces attacked. If you save the bishop and take on d6, if you trade off bishop for knight, look at this. At the very end, white is a whole piece up, but the knight is stuck behind enemy lines, and the knight on d7 drops.
Wow. David, that is the actual, that is the line that Alireza missed. The first intermezzo was cool. This is just beautiful. The knight is trapped, and Bob's your uncle. And knight takes d7 is Alireza's choice, but the time he spent on that tells us he was calculating b takes a5. He spent something like 2.5, 3 minutes on that move. I think he's made the right choice. I think he maintains a very small but potentially significant edge. And I like that he's forcing himself to play fast. He didn't spend 8 minutes on that move.
Yeah, huge step in the right direction for Alireza Firouzja compared to a few days ago. But I've got to say, credit to Maxime, because that was a complicated line. And to even conceive of giving up a piece and trapping the knight on d7, that would have taken me an hour, let alone the 1 minute or 1.5 minutes that Maxime took. So really impressive, showing he's in great form. But still, like you said, white's position preferable, slightly fractured pawn structure, but control over the queen side. And now Maxime is preparing to break out in the center. He's going to play e5 next, I guess, Danya, because what else? And it's yet to be seen who that's going to favor. Yeah,
I mean, at first it seemed like Maxime was sort of kind of moving around, maybe a little bit aimless, but he's like the Count of Monte Cristo. It's just a matter of time until he starts trying to break out of his jail cell. It might take 100 years, but it's going to happen eventually, and he's going to make this tactical and impose his will on the course of events. e4 by Alireza. Maxime says, you're first to the party. I don't care. Let me join the party too. e5, and we've got ourselves a tactical game. Speaking of intermezzos, that blue arrow, David, you know what that means? That's not my arrow. That I did not sign up for that. I did not draw that arrow. I had nothing to do with it. But Maxime has something to do with it, and I think Alireza just missed this move. If he takes back on e4, is white worse in the ensuing endgame?
I mean, white's definitely not better. That's the big problem. And like you said, he missed it. There was a bit of a shake of the head, or at least he was kind of shaking to try and get the energy back. But he didn't think at all about taking on e5. When there's 4 pawns staring at each other like that, I mean, there's so much to calculate. Alireza, he's clearly trying to keep a good pace on the clock. Definitely a match strategy, but that's come at the detriment at his position potentially. And he has allowed this trade of queens. Like you said, I don't know whether black's better. I would definitely take black, but Firouzja, he's going to be hating the trend of this game suddenly.
And there's a million candidate moves here unexpectedly for Maxime. The reason he's not responding that quickly is, first of all, rook takes e5 is the sort of automatic move, but you could also take on a5. And you could make a case for having connected pass pawns. Yes, black will have connected pass pawns in the endgame. You also have a move like bishop h6, very Maxime style. Right, playing on an unexpected side of the board, activating the bishop first, trying to force an awkward response, and then taking one of the pawns. Complicated decisions to make. Maxime plays bishop h6. He's down to 3.5 minutes. This could fizzle out, David. I could see like trades happening and this fizzling out into a draw. I could also see this endgame becoming, turning into complete pandemonium.
Yeah, the prophet, Danya. Bishop h6 was not on my radar. I was looking at both of the pawns, trying to weigh up the pros and cons there. But like you said, it's a very Maxime move to look for these sneaky, hidden intermezzos, these hidden pins, traps. And okay, he takes this pawn. Maybe less high reward, but also much less risk by taking this pawn now. And I'm assuming white will play a move. Ooh, bishop b6, I was going to say. f4. f4 feels loose. Bishop b6 would be a pawn sacrifice, but I don't know if black wants to take it. This one, Maxime, you can sense he feels the moment. He's getting excited.
Yeah, white really loosey-goosey, helter-skelter here. A lot of tactics, a lot of tension. a lot of chaos, and it does feel like Maxime kind of slowly moving back into the driver's seat. But I got to keep emphasizing the time management. He is still down 45 seconds. Alireza kind of doggedly clinging to that time advantage, and I think that is one of the keys to victory. The problem is you also have to maintain a good position, and that part hasn't been quite as successful. Now, I think a lot of people, David, would automatically play bishop takes d2 and rook takes c4, but it's so important to realize piece activity so much more important than pawn count in the endgame. That line would have allowed white's rook to infiltrate d7. Maybe black's still okay there, but why on earth would you allow white to have easy play? You cannot afford to lose the b7 pawn. That is the worst case scenario for black, because then the a pawn, the red carpet, is essentially unrolled immediately.
Yeah, but now, however, that move is a threat because black would be able to challenge the 7th rank with one of his rooks. So Maxime lining up against the white e-pawn. If this were a bullet game, I think Firouzja would have played the move f3 in an instant. I don't really see any other candidate moves here. But you can sense both players, they're slowing down slightly as we approach the climax of this game.
A little disturbing that Alireza is taking his time. You're absolutely right. He does play f3, cooler heads prevail. And this just shows us the position a lot more complex than it seems. Bishop takes d2 and knight c4. The bailout option, getting rid of the minor pieces. Alireza could take the knight instead, but I feel like that's asking for trouble with the pawn on b4 and the crosshairs of potentially all of black's pieces should the rook move back to a8. Are we going to see a draw here, David, or are things going to heat up again?
Well, it feels like a draw is the most likely purely because pieces are disappearing and we might reach a rook endgame, but I wouldn't say it's dead yet. Knight c4, I think I would... Well, I'm not sure who I would take. I don't want to take sides here at all.
You don't be on the wrong side of history.
Exactly. Whoever's side I take, I know is going to be jinxed there. But knight takes bishop, rook back to e7 to challenge. It feels like black is very safe or relatively safe. I'm not sure whether Maxime can hope for more than that right now. Who would you pick, Dania?
I think I'd pick the Frenchman here, honestly. The Frenchman with more than one name. And, I honestly, I don't want to be too risky here as a commentator. I don't want to say anything too audacious, but I think the 3 results are possible. It could be a draw. Black could win if white blunders. White could win if black blunders. I think a draw is by far the most likely result. In all seriousness, I would probably take black because I'm very partial to protected passed pawns. It's very important in any rook endgame to ask yourself, if all the rooks disappeared, what is the evaluation? And very likely, black would be winning in a pawn endgame. Of course, white is not going to trade off more than one pair. He is probably going to trade off one pair. Black now wants to take on d7 himself and block with the other rook on e7. But I think that they're probably going to repeat moves at some point, unless black starts hunting for this b6 pawn. I can see this getting tactical once again.
Yeah, especially with these 2 Frenchmen and their flair in the endgame. But right now, it's really appropriate timing to start thinking about this king of pawn endgame, as you mentioned, Dania. You don't want to calculate too much, but you just look at that passed pawn on c6. You have to avoid these rook trades. Firouzja, knowing him, he's looking for chances. He'll want something a bit fruity here to keep asking questions, to keep some pressure on. But I do think actually it's white who should be playing for safety. I mean, just king f2 or trade one set of rooks and go in. And this is level, but you don't want to play this with 5 seconds on your clock when it could suddenly turn.
Oh, yeah. That would be wrong on so many levels. And don't go rook c7 here, David, right? When you try to get cute and you try to get fancy and cheeky, that's when you lose in 2 seconds. And I'm going to show this in 2 seconds, because that's the time that we have before he moves. Alireza is down to a minute. If you play rook c7, trying to set up a bridge for the other rook, you lose on the spot. Black plays king e7. Rook d8 is not in the cards. And if you play rook b1, black is able to keep both of his extra pawns while sliding either the king or the rook to the c file and neutralizing the threat on c7. So this is how you lose. Alireza, he wants none of that. He drops his rook back, which tells us, is he still trying to maintain winning chances? Is he suddenly scared and trying to find a bailout option? But he's down to 40 seconds. This is getting a little bit concerning for him. I'm going to say it's still a draw. It's still equal. But I feel like MVL is getting optimistic here.
Yeah, I've seen MVL win these types of positions before when suddenly momentum turns, it becomes a race and he's got more time on his clock to calculate. And by race, I mean Black ever winning this b6 pawn, even at the cost of some of his kingside pawns potentially a bit later on. Yeah, Firouzja, you mentioned that 2 seconds thing. That was all he was going to spend, but using a minute and a half there might backfire. You could imagine Black playing king e6, rook d7, forcing a trade of one set of rooks, and White's rook on b3, passive, defending a pawn. Black's queenside, they're going to start rolling so quickly. I think suddenly it's Maxime who's definitely getting optimistic here.
Although after that incredible, heroic defensive display against Jan Nepomniachtchi, this seems like a pretty straightforward task for Alireza. He's got hours on his clock, 39 seconds. What a luxury. I think it's crucial for him to activate this rook at the right moment and maybe slide it up to d8 proactively so that it's able to move around and create threats. If Black is able to get in king e6 and rook d7, then things get unpleasant. Maxime taking a different approach. He trades off a pair of kingside pawns. There we go, rook d8. There's the idea, David, of rook c8 and rook takes c6 that should be on Maxime's radar as well. Easy to forget about. I think Firouzja is holding this comfortably.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest rook d6 just to hint at that threat, Danya. But yeah, he's being even more ambitious right now. And to trade or not to trade, that's the first question. Do you keep all the rooks on the board?
No, I think rook c8 is the cleanest path to a draw. But Alireza clearly taking this decision very seriously. And he actually trades. But okay, yeah, we're going to get liquidation here. No reason for Maxime to do anything brazen. Just get rid of that pawn, offer a draw, move on to the next game. And 10 seconds? No real chances here, and a draw by agreement.
Yeah, no real chances there for either side. Not enough pawns simply. The players showing each other a lot of respect in that endgame, but it could have gone either way. It felt like the calm before the storm, a bit of a cagey affair there. And ultimately, neither player, Danya, really has too much cause to be dissatisfied. It's